Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ashley Leffel, and I am a public service librarian in Plano, Texas. And I am so excited to welcome you to our author spotlight today. You are in for a treat. We are going to be talking not only about the graphic novel Wake Now in the Fire, but we're also going to be talking about censorship at large and how it's impacting librarians, authors, illustrators, and editorial staff. So without further ado, I'd like to go ahead and introduce our wonderful panel. We have Jarrett Dapier and AJ Dungo. They are the author and illustrator of Wake Now in the Fire from 10 Speed Graphic. And we also have Ginee Seo, the VP Editorial Director at 10 Speed Press. Welcome, everyone. Now, I know this is just a 30-minute conversation and it's going to go by fast, but audience, if you do have questions, you can ask them, and maybe we'll have a little bit of time at the end that we can answer those for you, and you'll ask those through the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. All right, so let's go ahead and dive in. So this is a question for all of you. So as an author, illustrator, and editorial director, you're impacted by censorship in different ways. How have you personally seen the impact of censorship in your profession? So Jarrett, we're going to start with you.
Okay, thank you, Ashley. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
I got the headphones working. Thanks so much for having all of us.
Oh, you're quiet again.
Really? Can you hear me? Bad? Hello?
You're very soft. Let's see.
How about now?
Perfect.
Okay. Okay, so thank you so much for having us. How has it impacted? So I'm both a librarian and a writer. It has significantly impacted both professions, and I've witnessed it firsthand. From the librarian perspective, of course, it has threatened people's livelihoods. It's threatened people's lives. It's threatened the reading life and literacy rates of children and young adults. It's really hampered a lot of things and spread sort of a cloud of fear in collection development and all sorts of elements of library work. It's also injected a lot of solidarity in librarians and also amongst people who love and support libraries. So that solidarity has been very motivating and also just wonderful to see. And I feel like it continues to increase. As a writer, I mean, I think censorship I've seen, I mean, in a similar way, it harms and threatens the livelihood of writers financially, but also existentially, I think, because that small voice gets stuck in your head of, will there be a market for this? Will publishing bite in an era, in a climate where it's harder to sell to school libraries and it's harder to sell to public libraries? I don't personally let that affect me when I'm writing. I'm going to write what I want to write, and if nobody wants it, that sucks. But part of it, the reason I guess I can go that route is because I'm a librarian. That's my full-time position, so I don't depend on my author income really. And I don't know many people who do, but if my income were dependent on it, I could see it being a big consideration. But censorship has always affected authors, and going back decades and decades, I grieve all of the Black authors, all of the people of color who write and were never published ever. When you look at publishing in 30s and 40s and 50s and 60s, all the way up to today, how many voices were lost? How many voices were suppressed or rejected? I grieve in many ways the stories we never saw or never saw the light of day. So it has always affected publishing and writing. But right now it's pretty hot.
Definitely agree. And you're seeing it from so many different angles. Thank you, Jarrett. All right, AJ.
Hi. There hasn't been a particular instance in my professional career. I've witnessed the effects of it in media and in journalism and academia. But if anything, it's just reinforced my belief in speaking up for what I believe in, regardless of the consequences. A lot of my cartoonist colleagues have had books banned, and it's seen as somewhat of a badge of honor, you know. But yeah, it's just sort of steeled my resolve in like speaking truth to power.
I love that. Thank you. All right, Ginee, how about you?
I'm going to kind of repeat what Jarrett basically said about just the impact on creators. I mean, obviously, there is a big concern in terms of book sales, you know, and definitely I know for certain smaller publishers, particularly who do specialize in publishing for a diverse community. I think some of those publishers have been hit especially hard. I think publishing generally has seen um, educational sales, sales to libraries in particular, going, you know, I mean, that has been difficult, I think, and particularly challenging. And I think um, anytime you see a book that is being banned, I know that outside of publishing and outside of our community, people think, oh, well, that's great, right? It's great for sales because it brings attention to the book. That is actually not the case. I mean, or that is the case maybe if you're J.K. Rowling, you know, or you're already a high profile author, or Judy Blume, you know. I mean, I think those are probably the two most famous cases, but in other cases, particularly when a book is just starting out or a debut person, it is just really difficult. So I think there, you know, there is concern from a market perspective. There's absolutely a concern from a creator perspective. I think none of us want to acknowledge, and I think all of us are fighting against it tooth and nail, that it will affect how we view books. If anything, I think our resolve is strengthened. And at the same time, you know, in the backs of our brains, it's always, okay, how are we going to reach? How are we going to reach these places? Particularly, I think, I mean, I'm lucky enough to live in the Bay Area, so thank goodness we are relatively insulated from things like, you know, Ashley, I really feel for you being in Texas. But for me, you know, I feel like, well, I'm kind of living in the best possible place right now. And at the same time, I'm also thinking constantly, I don't want to be publishing books just for people, you know, who already know. I want to figure out how to reach people in the middle of the country. I want to figure out how do I reach the kids who need this and are getting, you know, their access is getting taken away. So that's something that I think about a lot.
And Ashley, I would say that as a librarian author, it's incredibly emotionally draining, particularly right now, to see just the onslaught of challenges and censorship and really vicious attacks on the profession of librarianship, but also the craft of writing and storytelling from as high up as state legislatures and governors and so on and so forth. So as a librarian witnessing that and knowing that kids are receiving the message, you know, that if their favorite book disappears or they don't have access to something that content is not allowed, and therefore, in a way, it's dehumanized, and that may be something they share, an identity they share within the book amongst the characters or the story or the situation, and so it's emotionally draining to know the real world effects of censorship, which has an effect on me as a writer and absolutely has. I'm so thankful to be able to have been able to work with Ginee and AJ and the whole team on this book in particular at this time. So that's been an incredible sort of source of hope and activism in a lot of ways. Like, we feel very active. But my picture book, Mr. Watson's Chickens, I just got an email today about it being moved from the children's section in an Alabama library to the young adult section. It's a picture book about two guys and an overwhelming chicken problem, and that's essentially being censored by moving it to a place where it won't be discovered. And so then I get this email from good amazing, good-hearted folks who are fighting that and asking me if I'm interested in exploring being a plaintiff in a lawsuit they might be filing against the city for that. And so in a lot of ways, of course, I'm interested in that, but also, do I have the brain space or the time at all to think about a lawsuit like this? Not really. But I really want to support them. So it's a lot that comes at you. Even when your book isn't censored, when you're a librarian or an author watching it happen. So
Yes, I can't imagine, already having to deal with being a librarian and all of the censorship that's going on, but then also having your books coming at you. I mean, I can't imagine the bandwidth that you need. So thank you for continuing to write. We really appreciate that. So since you showed us that wonderful book, Jarrett, can you tell us a little bit about Wake Now in the Fire and what it's about?
yeah, so I'll show it again because I still can't believe that I can hold it in my hands. It's such a beautiful object. Ginee and AJ and the art design team, GB Tron, and others there at 10 Speed just made the most beautifully designed thing. So I'm so excited for people to see it and hold it and read it physically. So it's the story of, it's based on a true story. The story is that in 2013, the Chicago Public Schools issued a directive to network chiefs, which managed, the many different, there are 600 schools in the district. And the directive was that all copies of Marjane Satrapi's graphic novel Persepolis must be removed from all campuses, all classrooms, all libraries within the system and delivered to the Department of Literacy. And this is effective immediately. And thankfully, only one of these chiefs, who I like to call Johnny on the spot, he acted on that email directive right away. And he ended up going to Lane Technical College Preparatory High School, which is a North Side magnet school. It's enormous. It's got something like 3,500 kids. And he happened to go there and pull about 30 copies of Persepolis from an English classroom. The teacher had to remove the books and bring them to the office. And she later told her class about what had happened. And they had read Persepolis earlier in the year and loved it. And they became just passionate as hell and outraged on her behalf and on behalf of, themselves and Persepolis. And a couple of them organized a protest to take place 4 days later on the very visible corner of Western and Addison and on the north side of Chicago. And they were really savvy. They spread the word so that WGN was there. It got international. Al Jazeera covered it. Also, members of the Office for Intellectual Freedom at ALA showed up. Artists like from School of Art Institute showed up to support the kids. And so all told, it was about 85 to 90 kids did this very visible protest of the censorship of this book. When I was in grad school, I witnessed this all sort of unfolding firsthand on Twitter when I worked at the Evanston Public Library in their teen space. And I watched as they were doing the planning and the news was breaking. And a year later or two, I ended up writing a thesis paper about what actually happened, because it all got swept under the rug. Nobody really found out how or why this happened, who issued the directive and so forth. But in the meantime, of course, the teens did amazing work. I did research to find out what was the timeline, who's involved, what's the what, how, when, or why. And I discovered not only, that there were these great teens who organized, but there had been a banned books club at the school called 451 Degrees Banned Books Club, and they had read Persepolis previously. And so not publicized is that this group organized a library sit-in for the Monday after the protest, and it became so crowded and so overrun by the amount of high schoolers who wanted to attend that it got canceled before it could even happen. And then also there were members of the student newspaper who covered this whole event and covered covered as much of it as they could. And so after I wrote my paper, or just as I was finishing it, I had submitted a FOIA to Chicago Public Schools asking for any notes, anything whatsoever. I basically put it like, I'm I'm just a poor, humble graduate student looking for some information, not a threat at all. I don't know if that's why they actually produced what they produced, but miraculously, about 2 weeks later, I received 46 pages of redacted emails, internal emails about this very decision and topic. And 2 years, a year earlier, they had told American Library Association, there's nothing, we don't have anything that we could show you. So they gave him like 8 pages of nothing. They gave me 46, something like that, pages. I was able to lift the redactions because they did it incorrectly. And then I had all the info, and it showed that the CEO of schools, who said she had no idea about this, was in on it from the beginning. Lots of different people in it, and really shed light on just how this all got kicked off. And it was pretty chilling to see how quickly one complaint about Persepolis being in one classroom on the west side of Chicago ballooned right away into get it the hell out of every school in the system, without any inquiry or curiosity whatsoever from administrators. So anyways, I ended up interviewing a lot of the teens involved, and published that research about the FOIA. And then I started thinking it would be fun to write it would be a great story as a graphic novel about banning a graphic novel, and all the teens involved. And so that's what Wake Now in the Fire became.
Love it. I love that it's a great story, but also I feel kind of like it's a roadmap for other teens who may be experiencing censorship in their schools, that, this is kind of my guidebook. Here are some things that I can do. Here are some ways that I can fight it. So I think this is going to be such an important book to have out here. So thank you so much for writing it. All
Thank you
right.
for saying that.
AJ, so throughout Wake Now in the Fire, the color palette is primarily grays, with the exception of the book Persepolis. Tell us a little bit about how you chose the illustration style.
This book is directed at teens and young adults, and I was sort of following that roadmap, sort of a visual language they could understand. I'm thinking like Super Mutant Teenage Academy by Gillian Tamaki, and all these different types of graphic novels that I enjoyed when I was a teen. But I think the main factor driving the style of this book was accommodating for its length. So before some massive editing, I had illustrated about 600 pages, over 600 pages of this book. And the one thing that I could think to do to meet my tight deadlines was give myself some limitations. So the biggest thing being like a large brushstroke, just to make sure that I didn't spend too much time on a page, and that way I wouldn't get too in the weeds with the details, and just focus on driving Jarrett's story forward with his characters, and be pretty clear about the messaging. Just keep it simple. I'd say stylistically, that's what the main impetus was.
And did you find that, throughout the story, the different people that Jarrett interviewed, they each had kind of their own little mini stories within the story. Did you find that you changed kind of your style for each person, or was it kind of uniform throughout?
Aesthetically, I'd say it's pretty uniform, but I did take into account like um, cultural differences, or um, just where they came from. Like Jarrett did a great job of describing who these people were and what their style was, and what motivated them, what their friend groups were like, what they were eating, what kind of boba they drank. So like all that stuff really informed the character design, but it all came from Jarrett.
Cool. Thank you so much, AJ. All right, Ginee, when you were approached with Wake Now in the Fire, what were some of your first thoughts, and how did the story evolve throughout the editorial process?
Well, I should actually say that I actually first saw this book when I was at Chronicle, and I was actually not the original editor on the book. That the credit for that goes to the wonderful Taylor Norman, who acquired the book as my editor when I was running the children's book program at Chronicle. So I came to it much more as a publisher and an admirer, and it was definitely something that when Taylor brought it to a meeting, I remember everybody thought right away, this is important. This is something we should do. This is a great story. And we loved, at that point, we had not signed on AJ as the person to do it. So we were just looking at a proposal and part of a script. And what really struck us was how perfectly, not just that the story itself was important, obviously, but we just fell in love with the way that Jarrett was able to capture the voices of these kids. They really struck us as true, and there's something really appealing about the way everything unfolded. It was a really emotional story, and I think one of the strengths of the book is it is definitely a roadmap. It is definitely bringing to light a really important and I think a hopeful end to something really bad that happened in Chicago. But in addition to all of that, it really shows you through these kids' lives why books are so important, how one book in particular can really affect you, and why it's necessary to do everything you can to keep it on the shelves, and I feel like in their different ways, each character is showing us why they need to do what they do to help save the book, or why in some cases they can't participate because they're just too traumatized by other things going on with their lives. So anyway, all of this to say, when I had the opportunity to bring Wake Now in the Fire over to 10 speed, I kind of jumped on that, partly because in many ways, Penguin Random House, which is the company that of which 10 speed is a part, has done so much, as you all know, to fight against book banning. And also, as it happens, Penguin Random House is the place where Marjane Satrapi's Persepolis is actually published from one of our sister companies. It's Pantheon, actually. So in some ways, I feel very fortunate to have everything kind of have fallen out the way that it did, and working with both Jarrett and AJ has just been such a fantastic experience. And I feel like AJ, he's very modest, but I will say, one of the things that I love so much about what AJ has brought to the book is he really thinks in metaphor. And you see that on every page. I mean, just the spread that you showed of one of the characters, his name is Aditi, and just the way that he portrays her kind of coming to grips with the person that she's becoming, and what is happening to her. It's just so powerful and emotional, and the book is sprinkled with moments like that, and I think that is very much how AJ thinks, as a creator when he approaches a book.
Love that. And that's such a powerful statement that, censorship and book banning impacts everyone differently because of the stories that they personally bring to it. And throughout this book, you just really get to see it for so many angles. So that is just fantastic. All right, we have 5 minutes left, but I feel like this is a very important question, and I don't know how we're going to do it in 5 minutes, but we're going to try. So, how do you battle self-censorship? Because sometimes it can feel so much easier to just say, I'm not going to include that. I'm not going to draw that. I'm not going to cover that controversial topic. How do you handle it as an author, illustrator, and editorial? All right, Jarrett, we're going to start with you.
Like I said earlier in the beginning, so I've always come from like a punk rock background in high school, setting up my own shows, DIY sort of ethic, and also just kind of anti-establishment from a young age, 14, 15 years old. And I don't know that I've ever really lost it. So there's always an element that is, if there was a voice that says you can't write about that, I tell it to fuck off. That's pretty much it. Whether it's going to sell, that's where the pain comes in. I've submitted things that public or my agent or publishers weren't interested in for whatever reason, and maybe it was because of the topic. One in particular is school shootings, but I'm intent on tackling that subject, and I know other authors have broken through with that topic, but it's important to me. It drives why I create, and so I just have to do it, and I keep going. And that's really it.
Thanks, Jarrett. All right, AJ.
Jarrett and I are cut from the same cloth. I think, if anything, it lights a fire under my butt, and it's highlighted the importance of speaking up against things you disagree with. I guess there are consequences career-wise, but if someone chooses not to hire me based on what I believe, I guess we weren't really meant to collaborate. It's made me more thoughtful about what I put out into the world, but I also have to just trust my audience.
Wonderful. And rounding it out, Ginee.
I have given a lot of thought to this because obviously this is not a new question, as Jarrett said. Censorship has been had. I mean, I've been in this business for, at this point, well over 35 years, and it has always been around. And a certain amount of self-censorship, if I'm being really honest, has always been happening, partly because there's an internal thing of what do I feel is appropriate, and then there is the other measure of but what is really important to share, and access, as I said. But within all of that, I think everybody has a different internal mechanism for when they decide, like, no, I can't go there, I think these days, I particularly feel like I just have to figure it out, sometimes something is so important that we just have to do it and damn the consequences, and other times I think, well, this is really important and maybe we need to cut back a little bit in order to try to get this to as many people as possible, or try to sneak it in to those states where they're being so rigid, but we know that there's an audience for this if we can just figure out a way. So anyway, that's kind of how I approach it all.
Wonderful. Well, Jarrett, AJ, and Ginee, thank you so much for an amazing conversation. This has just been a highlight for me, so thank you. I hope everybody has enjoyed. Thank you so much for coming. Next, we have a short break, so if you haven't done so already, make sure to visit the exhibit hall for free downloads and resources. Again, thank you so much, everyone, for attending, and we hope you have a great day.